It all started with a letter. A beige letter. Let me tell you, nothing good ever comes in a beige envelope. Beige is the color of dentist waiting rooms, of cubicle walls, of unsalted crackers. It is the official color of passive-aggressive bad news delivered via the United States Postal Service. And on this particular Saturday morning, a beige envelope was sitting in my mailbox like a little rectangular harbinger of doom, nestled between a coupon for 10% off gutter cleaning and a credit card offer printed in a font that screamed, "Financial Desperation." Before the letter, the morning had been perfect. Genuinely, postcard perfect. The kind of suburban perfection that makes you want to check if you're living in a simulation. I was on my back patio, cradling a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Programmer," watching the sun slice through the oak trees in my backyard. The air was cool and smelled of freshly cut grass, a scent provided by my neighbor, Henderson, who mowed his lawn with the obsessive precision of a diamond cutter every Saturday at 8:01 a.m. The synchronized hiss-thwump-thwump of the neighborhood's automated sprinkler systems provided a gentle backbeat to the morning quiet. This was Pleasant Valley Estates, a place that lived up to its name with an almost unsettling commitment. The houses were all tastefully similar. The lawns were a uniform shade of championship golf course green, and the people practiced a form of aggressive friendliness. You couldn't get your mail without being subjected to a cheerful, interrogative, "Morning, how's that new azalea bush settling in? Looked a little droopy yesterday." It was, in short, the kind of soul-crushing beigeness that the letter in my mailbox so perfectly represented. My one act of vibrant, vertical rebellion stood proudly in my front yard, a gleaming, 20-foot aluminum flagpole, from which the stars and stripes snapped crisply in the breeze. I'd installed it the week before. It was, I thought, a tasteful and patriotic addition to the neighborhood's aesthetic. Apparently, I was wrong. "What's that?" my wife, Sarah, asked, sliding the patio door open. She had that sixth sense all spouses have, the ability to detect a disturbance in their partner's emotional force from 50 paces. "Junk mail and a threat," I said, holding up the beige envelope. It was embossed with the HOA logo, a minimalist drawing of a single, non-threatening oak tree. "From the Pleasant Valley Homeowners Association, the Ministry of Beige." Sarah sighed. It was a practiced, weary sound, the sigh of a woman who knew she'd married a man with a dangerously low tolerance for petty bureaucracy. "Oh, Frank, please tell me you didn't put the recycling bin out an hour early again." "Worse," I said, tearing it open. "I think I committed an act of unapproved patriotism." I unfolded the thick, cream-colored paper and began to read aloud in my most serious, documentary narrator voice. "Dear Mr. Franklin Miller," I began, "this letter serves as a formal notice from the Pleasant Valley Estates Homeowners Association Covenant Compliance Committee." "The what?" Sarah snorted into her coffee. "The Covenant Compliance Committee," I repeated gravely. "Apparently, we have one. It has come to our attention that a new structure has been erected on your property, specifically 1-1 Flagpole." I paused for dramatic effect. "A complaint has been filed by a fellow homeowner regarding this addition. The primary concerns are twofold." I took a deep breath. 1. The structure is considered by the complainant to be out of harmony with the aesthetic uniformity of the community. "Aesthetic uniformity?" Sarah asked. "You mean our legally mandated 50 shades of taupe?" "Precisely. And 2, I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper, "preliminary observation suggests the structure exceeds the 15-foot, 15 height restriction for ancillary yard structures, as stipulated in the Pleasant Valley Covenants, Bylaw 7, Section 4, Paragraph C." I looked up at Sarah, my face a mask of feigned horror. It concludes with, "Please remedy this violation within 14 days to avoid further action, including daily fines." It's signed by Todd Bunsen, HOA president. Todd Bunsen. The man, the myth, the legend. I'd never officially met him, but his name was whispered on the neighborhood Facebook group like a suburban Voldemort. Todd, who allegedly measured the length of a neighbor's lawn with a ruler and left a violation notice because it was a quarter-inch too high. Todd, who once tried to get an emergency bylaw passed banning pickup trucks from being parked in driveways if they had visible signs of labor, that is, mud. Todd was the ghost in the suburban machine, the self-appointed guardian of enforced mediocrity. And now, his unwavering, beige-tinted gaze had fallen upon me. "So he's saying your flagpole is too flag and pole-y for the neighborhood?" Sarah asked, a smirk playing on her lips. "He's saying my freedom is too tall," I declared. "This isn't about a pole, Sarah. This is about tyranny, small, petty, beige-colored tyranny." "Okay, settle down, Patrick Henry," she said, patting my arm. "Just measure it. How tall is it?" "It's a 20-footer, I admitted. Standard residential size." "And the rule is 15 feet? "Apparently, for ancillary yard structures. I'd argue the flag of our nation is hardly ancillary, but I doubt Todd Bunsen is a man swayed by impassioned arguments about patriotic symbolism." "So, what are you going to do?" she asked. I looked down at the letter, at Todd Bunsen's neat, joyless signature. I looked out at my beautiful, gleaming flagpole. An idea, a terrible, wonderful, petty idea began to form in my mind. Ignoring it was an option. Complying was another. But there was a third path. The path of malicious compliance and weaponized pedantry. I walked inside and sat down at my computer. Sarah followed, leaning against the doorframe. "Frank, what are you doing? Don't send him a rant." "Oh, no," I said, cracking my knuckles. "Nothing so crude. This calls for a more nuanced approach." I opened a new email, addressed it to todd.bunsen@pleasantvalleyhoa.com, and typed in a subject line that I felt perfectly captured the gravity and absurdity of the situation. Subject: regarding your correspondence on excessive vertical expression. I hit send with a satisfying click. The first shot in the great flagpole war had been fired. The email reply from Todd Bunsen arrived precisely 17 minutes later. I'd barely finished my coffee. The man was either incredibly efficient or had literally nothing else to do with his life. I'm betting on the latter. His response was a masterwork of dismissive brevity. From Todd Bunsen to Frank Miller. Subject: regarding your correspondence on excessive vertical expression. Mr. Miller, the bylaw is clear, 15 feet. Please ensure your property is in compliance by the date specified. Regards, Todd Bunsen, President, Pleasant Valley HOA. No explanation. No pleasantries. Just the cold, hard fist of suburban law. I could feel my blood pressure ticking upward. This guy wasn't just a bureaucrat, he was an artist of condescension. "Okay," I said to Sarah, who was now reading over my shoulder. "The gloves are off. He wants to play by the book? We're going to read him the whole library." For the next 2 days, Todd and I entered into an email exchange that I am seriously considering publishing as a standalone work of tragicomic literature. I spent hours dissecting the HOA covenant, a document so dense and mind-numbing it could be used as a general anesthetic. I became a self-taught expert in the legal gray areas of flagpole governance. From Frank Miller to Todd Bunsen. Subject: regarding your correspondence on excessive vertical expression. Dear Mr. Bunsen, thank you for your prompt, if succinct, reply. In the interest of achieving full compliance, could you please provide clarification on Bylaw 7? 4.c?? Specifically, the term ancillary yard structure. Does the HOA not differentiate between a purely decorative item, such as a garden gnome or a flamingo, and an object of profound national symbolism? I would argue that a flagpole displaying the American flag is in a class of its own, and therefore potentially exempt from the height restrictions applied to lesser yard accoutrements. Furthermore, I'd like to formally request the official measurement protocol. Is the 15-foot limit measured from the mean soil grade, the concrete footing, or the lowest adjacent point of public right-of-way? My property possesses a slight, yet legally significant declination toward the curb. Respectfully, Frank Miller. His reply came in under an hour, from Todd Bunsen to Frank Miller. Frank, a flagpole is a structure. It is in your yard. The rule is 15 feet from the ground where the pole meets it. It is not complicated. Regards, Todd. He called me Frank. The passive-aggressive escalation was palpable. It was on. From Frank Miller to Todd Bunsen. Todd, thank you for the clarification. In that case, I must also inquire about the finial. The decorative eagle at the apex of the pole, is it included in the total height? Or is it considered a non-structural embellishment, akin to a weather vane? The language of the bylaw seems ambiguous on this point. A swift clarification would be appreciated before I undertake any costly modifications. Best, Frank. This time the reply took 3 hours. I imagined him furiously consulting with his Covenant Compliance Committee, a shadowy cabal that probably met in his garage. From Todd Bunsen to Frank Miller. Mr. Miller, the entire structure from the ground to its highest point cannot exceed 15 feet. That was it. He'd reverted to Mr. Miller. I was winning. Or at least I was successfully annoying him, which felt like a victory. For my grand finale, I drafted one last email. This time, however, my finger slipped. And instead of hitting reply, I hit reply all, sending my query to the entire HOA community mailing list. From Frank Miller to Todd Bunsen, Pleasant Valley mailing list. Dear Todd, and fellow Pleasant Valley residents, apologies for the broad distribution, but I wanted to ensure full transparency in this matter. Following a notice from the HOA, I am seeking to bring my American flagpole into compliance. I just want to be absolutely certain of the community's stance. Is it the official position of the HOA that the flag of the United States and the pole from which it is flown is to be legally categorized as an ancillary yard structure, holding the same regulatory status as, for example, a bird bath or a decorative wagon wheel? Just want to make sure I understand the rules before I take down Old Glory. Thanks, everyone. Frank Miller, a proud resident of Lot 72. The fallout was immediate and glorious. Within an hour, I had 3 emails from neighbors offering support. My next-door neighbor, Dave, a chill guy who worked in sales and appreciated good drama, sent one that just said, "You magnificent bastard. I'm with you." The digital curtain twitcher of our block, Brenda from Lot 74, sent a terse reply all. The rules are the rules for a reason. But the real prize was the email from Todd, sent only to me, its subject line in furious all caps. From Todd Bunsen to Frank Miller. Subject, cease and desist this email campaign immediately. I knew then that I had to escalate, not out of spite, but out of principle. And a little bit of spite. The next morning I called Bill's Flagpole Emporium. "Bill's," a gravelly voice answered. "Hi, I have a weirdly specific question," I said. "I need a flagpole that, from the base to the absolute tippy-top of its finial, is no taller than 14 feet and 11.75 inches. Can you do that?" There was a pause. "Son, you got an HOA problem, don't you?" "The worst kind," I confirmed. Bill chuckled. "Seen it 1,000 times. They get out their little tape measures like they're landing a rover on Mars. You want my advice? Get the 20-footer and a good lawyer." Tempting, I said. But today we fight with math. I want it custom cut, and I want a certified document stating its exact height." "You got it," Bill said, the amusement evident in his voice. "The spite pole, we call it. It's one of our most popular models." A week later, Bill's crew came out and installed my new flagpole. It was a beautiful thing, slightly shorter, but no less proud. I was out there with a tape measure and a level, overseeing the operation like a drill sergeant. Dave came over with 2 beers. "You really showed him," he said, handing me a cold one. "It's not about showing him," I said, taking a long sip. "It's about being absolutely, unequivocally, and documentably correct." Across the street, I saw the blinds on Brenda's front window twitch. The neighborhood was watching. The next afternoon, the moment of truth arrived. I was in my home office when a flash of yellow caught my eye. There, on my front lawn, was Todd Bunsen. He was dressed in khaki shorts, a white polo shirt tucked in tightly, and socks with sandals. In his hand, he held a bright yellow device that looked like a prop from a sci-fi movie. It was a laser measure. He didn't knock, he didn't say hello, he just stood on the sidewalk, raised the device, and aimed it at the top of my flagpole. A little red dot danced on the eagle's wing. He was meticulous, taking readings from 3 different spots. He scribbled notes on a small beige clipboard. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of it was breathtaking. He was trespassing on my property with the confidence of a king surveying his domain. I just watched from the window, a slow grin spreading across my face. I had the certified document from Bill's. I had my receipt. I was invincible. The next day, another beige envelope was in my mailbox. I opened it with a flourish, expecting a letter of apology, a formal retraction. It was not an apology. It was an official violation notice, complete with a photograph of my flagpole. A fine of $50 per day, retroactive to yesterday, had been levied against my property. The reason? As per calibrated laser measurement taken on September 5th, the highest point of the structure's finial was found to be 15 feet and 1.5 inches from the aggregate soil level at the structure's base, a violation of Bylaw 7.4. C. 1.5 inches. The man had fined me over 1.5 inches. My custom-ordered, certified 14-foot, 11.75-inch flagpole was, according to his space-age measuring tool, 1.5 inches too tall. Maybe the concrete footing settled high. Maybe the eagle finial was having a proud day and puffed out its chest. It didn't matter. Sarah was speechless. 1.5 inches? Are you kidding me? He's making this all up. I looked at the notice, at the smug official font. My anger wasn't hot anymore. It had cooled, hardened into something else. Something cold, clear, and dangerously creative. "It's not about the inches, honey," I said, my voice eerily calm. "It was never about the inches. It's about the principle. And this man, this beige tyrant, has just made a very, very big mistake." For the next 24 hours, my house became a strategic command center. The dining room table was buried under documents. The original property survey, the city zoning codes I'd printed from the county website, and of course the HOA covenants and bylaws, my sacred enemy text. I had it open, highlighted, and littered with sticky notes. I was a man possessed. Sarah treated me like a scientist on the verge of either a Nobel Prize or a complete psychotic break. She would quietly place a sandwich and a glass of water on the edge of the table, pat my shoulder, and retreat to a safe distance. I was muttering to myself, pacing the room, rereading the same passages until the words blurred together. I was looking for anything, a contradiction, a poorly defined term, an Oxford comma that changed the entire meaning of a sentence. My initial plan was to challenge the accuracy of his laser measure. I spent an hour on a forum for professional surveyors, learning about calibration standards and atmospheric distortion. It was a dead end. Proving his device was off by 1.5 inches from 50 feet away would be impossible. Defeated, I slumped into my chair, staring at the page that had caused all my problems. Bylaw 7.4. C. The words mocked me. All ancillary yard structures, including but not limited to sheds, gazebos, pergolas, playground equipment, and flagpoles, shall not exceed a height of 15 feet. 15 anor. A structure is defined as any object erected or installed on a property with a fixed location on the ground. I read that last sentence again. And then a third time. My brain, which had been grinding away uselessly for hours, suddenly snagged on 3 words. With a fixed location. A fixed location on the ground. The flagpole was set in concrete. It was fixed. A shed is fixed. A gazebo is fixed. What isn't fixed? A car isn't fixed. A wheelbarrow isn't fixed. A crane. The idea hit me with the force of a physical blow. A bolt of pure, unadulterated, magnificently petty genius. I shot out of my chair, sending a cascade of papers fluttering to the floor. A construction crane is a vehicle. It parks. It doesn't have a fixed location on the ground. It has tires and outriggers. But those are temporary. If a crane, parked in my driveway, were to simply lift an object, say a flagpole with a flag on it, that flagpole would not be a structure under the HOA's own definition. It would be temporary cargo being hoisted by a legally parked vehicle. It was airtight. It was ludicrous. It was going to cost an obscene amount of money. It was the most beautiful idea I'd ever had. I sprinted into the living room, where Sarah was trying to watch a cooking show, pretending not to be worried about her husband's descent into madness. "Sarah!" I yelled, waving the bylaws in my hand like a declaration of independence. "I've got it! It's legal, it's hilarious, and it's going to make Todd Bunson's head explode." I laid out the entire plan. I explained the fixed location loophole, the temporary nature of a vehicle, the sublime pedantry of it all. I watched her face cycle through the 5 stages of spousal reaction to a certifiably insane idea. First came confusion. "Wait, run that by me again? You're going to rent a..." "What?" Then disbelief. Her eyes were wide. "You want to rent a construction crane? A giant yellow construction crane? To raise a 5-pound flag every single day?" Next, pragmatism. This was Sarah's home turf. "Frank, do you have any idea how much that will cost? What about the noise? It will crack the driveway. The neighbors will murder us." I had answers. "I'll get a quote. I'll make sure it's a quiet one. I'll tell them to be careful. And who cares about the neighbors? This is for their freedom, too." Finally, as I finished my passionate, unhinged explanation, I saw the corners of her mouth twitch. A giggle escaped, then a full laugh. The final stage had been reached. Acceptance and unwavering support. "You know," she said, wiping a tear of laughter from her eye, "Todd Bunson deserves this. He has brought this upon himself with his laser beams and his 1.5 inches. Okay, Frank, do it. Burn it all to the ground." With my wife's blessing, I was unstoppable. I grabbed my laptop and started searching for crane rental near me. The first few calls were, to put it mildly, not productive. "Yeah, A1 Crane Services." "Hi, I'd like a quote for a small crane rental for a residential job." "Sure thing. What are you lifting? An AC unit onto a roof, some steel beams for a remodel?" "A flag," I said. There was a long, dead silence on the other end of the line. Flag. Yes, an American flag. "Sir, is this a prank call?" Click. The second call went similarly. "City Lift and Rigging, how can I help you?" "Yes, I need to hire a crane and an operator, probably for about an hour every morning." "Okay, for a construction site." "No, for my driveway." "I see. And what's the tonnage on the lift?" "Well, I said, trying to sound professional. The flag itself is maybe 5 pounds. The pole is aluminum, so call it 30 pounds total. The man on the other end made a sound that was half cough, half laugh. Son, our smallest crane is rated for 15 tons. I think that might be overkill. I'm gonna hang up now. I was starting to lose hope. Maybe this idea was too insane, even for the people who operate giant machinery for a living. I had one number left on my list, Gus's Lift and Haul. It didn't have a website, just a phone number and a promise of no job too weird. A voice that sounded like it had been aged in a barrel of whiskey and cigarette smoke answered. Gus's... Hi, Gus? Yeah. I decided to just lay it all out. I told him everything. The HOA, Todd Bunsen, the first flagpole, the email war, the spite pole, the laser measure, the 1.5-inch violation, the fixed location loophole. I talked for 5 solid minutes without interruption. When I finished, the silence on the other end was profound. I was sure he'd hung up on me. Gus? You there? I heard a low rumble, a gravelly chuckle that built into a deep, booming laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had seen every crazy thing the world had to offer and had just been presented with a new champion. So let me get this straight, Gus finally said, his voice thick with amusement. You want to pay me and my 40-ton Grove mobile crane to show up at your house at the crack of dawn every morning? To hoist an American flag 50 feet in the air? Just to stick it to some suit in your neighborhood? That is a perfect summary of the situation, yes, I said. That's the best damn thing I've ever heard, Gus roared. Son, I'll be there at 5 a.m. tomorrow, and for a job this patriotic, I'm giving you a discount. I didn't sleep a wink that night. I was vibrating with a mixture of giddy anticipation and sheer terror. What if the crane was too big for the street? What if it sank into the asphalt? What if Gus was just a beautiful, gravelly-voiced dream? At 4:45 a.m., I gave up on sleep and went to the driveway, clutching a thermos of coffee in one hand and a massive, neatly folded American flag in the other. The world was silent and still, bathed in the pale pre-dawn gray. The only light came from a single street lamp, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns of Pleasant Valley Estates. The air was so quiet I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in my own kitchen. Sarah stood silhouetted in the doorway, wrapped in her favorite robe, holding her own mug. She gave me a look that was equal parts, I can't believe I'm married to you, and this is the most exciting thing that's ever happened on this block. Then I heard it. A low, distant rumble. It wasn't a car. It was deeper, more powerful. The rumble grew into a thrumming engine noise, punctuated by the sharp, pneumatic pshh of air brakes. And then it turned the corner. It was glorious. A monstrous, beautiful, bright yellow Grove crane, big enough to build a skyscraper, crept down our sleepy suburban street like a mechanical god. Its amber warning lights strobed silently, painting dancing patterns on the identical beige houses. It moved with an impossible, lumbering grace. Gus, a silhouette in the high cab, navigated it with surgical precision, backing it perfectly into my driveway. The sheer scale of it was hilarious. It made my 2-car garage look like a doghouse. Gus killed the engine, and the silence that rushed back in was even more profound than before. The cab door swung open, and he climbed down. He was exactly as I'd pictured, late 50s, built like a fire hydrant, with a magnificent gray mustache and a faded U.S. Marines cap pulled low on his brow. He took in the scene, the quiet street, my nervous grin, and gave me a slow, approving nod. "Mornin'," he grunted, his voice even more like gravel in person. "Let's raise some hell, and a flag." For the next 15 minutes, Gus went about his work with a quiet, practiced professionalism that was mesmerizing to watch. With a series of clicks and whirs from an electric motor, 4 massive outriggers extended from the crane's body, planting themselves firmly onto thick wooden blocks Gus placed on my driveway. The entire vehicle lifted itself a few inches off its tires with a low hydraulic hum. The sound was just loud enough to be ominous. It was also just loud enough to wake the watchdogs. A light flicked on in the house directly across the street. It was Brenda from Lot 74, the neighborhood's unofficial surveillance chief. I saw her silhouette in the window, the blinds pulled slightly aside. Her face, even from this distance, was a perfect mask of horrified indignation. I watched her scurry away from the window, a cell phone already pressed to her ear. The first domino had fallen. "Looks like your fan club is awake," Gus noted, not even looking up from his work as he unspooled a length of steel cable from the crane's massive boom. "She's calling the big boss," I said. "He'll be here any minute." I wasn't wrong. Less than 5 minutes later, a beige sedan came screeching around the corner, its tires protesting on the clean asphalt. It slammed to a halt 20 feet from my driveway. The driver's side door flew open and out stormed Todd Bunsen. He was a vision of pure, unadulterated rage. He was wearing a navy blue silk bathrobe over what looked like striped pajamas, and his feet were shoved into leather loafers with no socks. His normally neat hair was sticking up in several directions. He looked like he'd been teleported directly from his bed to my curb. "Miller!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with fury. "What is the meaning of this? Have you lost your mind?" I took a calm, deliberate sip of my coffee. "Morning, Todd. Lovely day for a flag raising, isn't it? As you can see, I've taken down the non-compliant permanent structure." He gestured wildly at the 40-ton behemoth in my driveway. "That! What is that? It's a construction vehicle. It's a blight. It's yellow!" "It's a vehicle, Todd," I said, channeling my inner lawyer. "Legally parked on my private property. And the flagpole isn't a structure anymore. It's just cargo waiting to be lifted. The bylaws are quite clear on the distinction." Todd's face went from red to a shade of purple I'd previously only seen on eggplants. He was sputtering, searching for a violation, a foothold for his authority. "The noise! You're violating noise ordinances!" From high up in the crane's cab, Gus's voice crackled over a small external speaker he'd switched on. "Engine's not even on, pal. All electric till 7. The calm, disembodied voice from the machine seemed to break Todd's brain. He just stood there, his mouth opening and closing like a fish, as I handed the folded flag to Gus, who began attaching it to the crane's hook with a series of sturdy clips. That's when the third party arrived. The flashing red and blue lights were surprisingly gentle in the dim morning. But they signaled the final escalation. A police cruiser pulled up silently behind Todd's car. 2 officers got out. One was older, with a mustache that had seen more misery than any man should, and a deep, world-weary sigh already forming on his lips. This was Officer Miller. His partner was younger, crisper, with a look of earnest confusion on his face. Officer Davis. Todd rushed toward them as if they were a rescuing cavalry. "Officers, thank God. This man is a menace. He's violating dozens of codes, noise ordinances, commercial vehicle restrictions, aesthetic terrorism." Officer Miller ignored Todd completely. His tired eyes drifted from the massive crane to me holding my coffee, to Gus giving a little wave from the cab, and then back to the crane. He took off his hat and slowly ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Okay," he said, his voice gravelly with a lack of sleep and an abundance of disbelief. "I have to ask, what is happening here?" "Good morning, officer," I said politely. "My name is Frank Miller. I live here. I was just about to raise the flag. It's a daily tradition of mine." "With a crane?" Officer Davis asked, pulling out a notepad, his pen poised to document this madness. "Well, yes," I explained. "My previous flagpole was, according to my HOA president here," I gestured to the sputtering Todd, 1.5 inches too tall, a fixed structure. This crane, however, is a vehicle, and the flag is just temporary cargo. No laws being broken." Officer Miller stared at me for a long, silent moment. I could see him mentally calculating how much overtime he wasn't getting paid for this. He finally turned to Todd. "Sir, is the vehicle illegally parked?" "It's an atrocity," Todd shrieked. "That's not what I asked," Miller said, his patience wearing visibly thin. "Is it blocking a fire hydrant? Is it parked in a red zone?" "No, but—" "Is he operating loud machinery before the city ordinance allows?" he asked, turning back to me. "Not until 7:01 a.m., officer," I said cheerfully. "Gus here," I pointed up at the cab, "is just going to use the electric hoist motor. It's quiet as a church mouse." Officer Miller pinched the bridge of his nose, closing his eyes. I think he was praying for a simple robbery, a noise complaint, anything other than this. He opened his eyes and looked at Todd. "Sir, as far as I can tell, there's nothing illegal happening here. It's a vehicle, on his property, and it's quiet." Todd looked utterly defeated. The law had failed him. As this verdict was delivered, the sun finally began to breach the horizon, spilling pink and orange light across the sky. "All right, Gus," I called out. "Let's do it." With a faint electric whir, the cable began to rise. The flag, our flag, unfolded and began its majestic ascent. It went up and up, past the roof of my house, past the top of the oak trees. It rose 50, then 60, then 70 feet into the morning air. And then a kind of magic happened. Everyone just stopped. Todd stopped sputtering. Officer Davis stopped writing in his notepad. The other neighbors, who had slowly been creeping out onto their lawns, stood still. We all just stared up. The flag caught the first rays of direct sunlight, a brilliant splash of red, white, and blue against the pastel sky. It was beautiful. Utterly, absurdly, magnificently beautiful. After a moment of silence, Officer Miller let out a low whistle. He put his hat back on, turned to me, and for the first time, a small smile touched his tired face. "All right, Miller," he said, shaking his head slowly. "You win." The immediate aftermath of that first glorious, crane-assisted dawn was almost as satisfying as the flag raising itself. Officer Miller gave Todd a look that said, "Don't you ever call us for something this stupid again," before getting back in his cruiser. As they pulled away, Miller gave me a slow, tired wave from the driver's seat, a gesture of pure, unadulterated respect from one man weary of the world to another. Todd Bunsen just stood there on the curb, his silk bathrobe fluttering in the breeze created by the departing police car, looking like a king whose castle had just been conquered by a jester with heavy machinery. He didn't say another word. He just got in his beige sedan and slunk away. The story, of course, went nuclear, at least on a local level. My neighbor Dave, a true connoisseur of suburban drama, had filmed the entire confrontation on his phone. By lunchtime, the video was the top post on our town's subreddit, with the title, "My neighbor is a legend. HOA told him his flagpole was too tall, so he did this." The comments were a tidal wave of support from people who had all suffered under their own petty HOA tyrants. I was a hero. Flagpole Frank, they called me. Dave, high on his newfound role as my official documentarian, created a Facebook group called The Friends of Flagpole Frank, which amassed over 500 members by the end of the day. People posted their own HOA horror stories and photos of their own flags, flying in solidarity. A reporter from the local news website called me for a quote. I gave her a simple one. The HOA bylaws are very specific about fixed structures. I'm just a law-abiding citizen who really, really loves to fly the flag. The real climax, however, came at the emergency HOA meeting Todd called a week later. The community center's meeting room, which usually held about 10 people for discussions on seasonal planting schedules, was packed. People were standing along the walls. I walked in with Sarah, and the room broke into a quiet, respectful applause. I felt like a suburban Rocky. Todd, looking pale and sleep-deprived, stood at a podium and tried to regain control. He proposed a new emergency bylaw. Bylaw 11.7. F. The overnight parking of any private or commercial vehicle with a gross weight exceeding 20 tons for non-construction purposes is hereby prohibited. He was immediately heckled. "What about my cousin's RV?" someone shouted from the back. "Is this the no fun allowed bylaw?" yelled another. When he called for a vote, it was voted down so spectacularly that it was almost sad. Dave, sitting next to me, just cackled. The final humiliation came when someone from the back of the room threw a dinner roll that bounced harmlessly off the podium. Todd's reign of terror was officially over. My $50 a day fine was quietly dropped from the HOA ledger. I never received another beige envelope again. I kept the crane service with Gus for a full week, just to make sure the point was well and truly made. It became a beloved neighborhood ritual. Every morning at 5:30 a.m., a small crowd would gather at the end of my driveway with lawn chairs and thermoses of coffee. Gus was a local celebrity. People would bring him donuts. He'd hoist the flag, give everyone a wave from the cab, and then rumble off to his actual paying jobs. It was the most patriotic and most ridiculous week of my life. On the final day, I paid Gus, adding a hefty bonus. "You're a good man, Frank Miller," he said, shaking my hand. His grip was like a vice. "You're a great American, Gus," I replied. "If you ever need a character witness or someone to annoy a petty tyrant, you have my number." That weekend, I went out and bought a new flagpole. It was a beautiful, sturdy 14-foot, 6-inch model. I installed it myself, in the exact same spot as the first two. It didn't soar quite as high as the crane-lifted flag, but it looked perfect. It was in full, glorious, unassailable compliance. A few weeks later, life in Pleasant Valley Estates had returned to normal, or a new normal. The neighborhood felt a little less beige, a little more colorful. People waved at me with a knowing smile. I was Flagpole Frank, the man who fought the law and won. Sarah and I were on the back patio, watching the sunset paint the sky. The new, perfectly legal flagpole stood proudly in the front yard. Everything was quiet again. "You know," Sarah said, leaning her head on my shoulder, "I almost missed the crane." "Nah," I said, putting my arm around her. "It served its purpose. The point was made." "So, no more grand projects?" she asked, a hint of hope in her voice. I smiled, looking up at the flag, then back at the beige siding of my house. "Well," I said, a familiar, mischievous twinkle in my eye. "I was just reading the bylaws on exterior lighting. Turns out there's no limit on the lumen count for patriotic displays." Sarah groaned, but I could see her trying to hide a smile. "I'm thinking stadium grade," I said, winking. "Tastefully, of course.